Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, EmeraldPlanet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the EmeraldPlanet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the EmeraldPlanet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 143 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. The technologies and the services and the products really are bringing change to the planet as we move from 7 billion to 9 billion souls by 2050. So who are the people, the technologies that are going to make a difference, and how can we make our urban spaces, now that over 50% of the world's population do live in urban areas, and we have a group of landscape architects who are going to be talking about how you need to look at the outside as well as the inside of the buildings, and that actually the entire city space, regardless of where it's located, really is part of our living room as we move through the 21st century. And so I have the first guest is with us, Bradford McKee, who is the editor-in-chief of Landscape Architect magazine, a very professional publication, I must say. Brad, he goes by Brad.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
And tell us about Landscape Architect magazine, about the viewers and the number of people that you're reaching and the location and these kinds of things. And then let's talk about what's going on as far as the urban landscape here and around the globe.
Sure thing. We're published by the American Society of Landscape Architects. It's the main professional society for landscape architecture in North America. It was founded in 1899. In fact, our motto is green since 1899. The magazine itself was founded in 1910, so it recently celebrated its 100th anniversary.
This is a huge, long history that you have.
Yes, indeed. It began as a quarterly, and sometime in the 50s, I think, it became maybe 6 times a year, and then it went to, sometime in the 1980s, it became a monthly. So,
well, I know that my understanding is you have about 16,000 members, plus or minus a few, and you have chapters throughout the United States. So that has a very broad reach, and then if you look at the sphere of influence those 16,000 members have, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of people you're reaching.
Yes, they have the answers, indeed. We reach a lot more through social media as well.
Well, and I know this is one of the things, but having such a professional publication is really important to move us through the 21st century.
Well, indeed, and it's a rate over the course of a day that the surrounding countryside does.
Of course, we have all the square footage, that's going vertical, horizontal. We have all these non-green roofs, which we're going to be talking about with some of your colleagues in all of this. And it's just, there's everything to absorb, but there's little really to kind of shelter us from all this heat and the water.
Exactly. So in the countryside, you have a lot of vegetation, which can absorb heat. It can dissipate it. It can encourage evaporation, which is a cooling mechanism for cities. Whereas most of the city is all hard mineral surfaces, which are concrete and asphalt and brick and other masonry. Those surfaces absorb heat all day. They trap it. They amplify it, and then even into the evening, they radiate it back out into the city air, which makes cities very hot. So you can be at a stoplight at 9 p.m. and your thermometer will read 99 degrees. And no wonder, you're in the middle of a hot city.
Yeah, well, and also you're in a capsule, which is encapsulating you in heat, and it's not really just protecting you from it, but actually it's generating. What do you think cities can do that you're learning from the professionals in landscape architecture that are sharing about how cities can protect themselves and make them more livable space as the Earth continues to warm?
Many things. And let me say that cities are moving much faster than either state or national governments, especially our federal government in this regard, because they see the costs and the effects most directly. So, first thing to do is plant a lot of trees everywhere. Make them big, make them numerous. The other thing is green roofs, which is a thin layer of vegetation built on your rooftop that absorbs rainwater. It will insulate your building from extremes of heat and cold. It will even protect your roof membrane. We have there's a picture, one of these pictures shows our green roof at the office right above.
And I think this is right here.
My head. That is in Chicago actually, but there's another slide that shows the space where I can go up in the middle of the day. It's also great habitat. There are birds and insects up there all day long feeding, and plus it's beautiful.
Well, looking at the beauty of this and the practicality of that, as far as the green roofs, are they more or less expensive? And then again, you were talking about some of the benefits, how it can help cool the building, reduce and also hold the heat as far as wintertime is concerned.
Yeah.
What are some of the other benefits that we have from such a green roof?
Well, the green roof will hold, for instance, on our building, the green roof will hold the first 3/4 of an inch of rainwater. So a lot of rain events, as we call them, are a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, or 3/4 of an inch, and all that rain will stay in place on our roof, which means it's not going down into storm sewers, storm drains, and running off to waterways and washing off pollution into rivers and streams.
Well, many people wonder why that's really important, but the velocity that's coming off of these roofs, particularly when you have millions of square feet of roof space that's just catching this, and then it's just putting it right into the streets and right into the tributaries.
Right, exactly. It's just a funnel right to the street. So the other major effect we see of climate change in cities are these intense, more frequent storms that drop a lot of rain on cities, and that water runs off into the storm sewer, if you're lucky, and then in one bad case runs into a stream, washing off pollution, and in another case it combines with the sewage in the sanitary sewer and overloads the system, all of which costs a lot of money to treat, that sewage, but also sometimes it's too much for the system to treat, and guess where it goes?
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about that too, Brad, is that you want to filter that water before it actually gets out to the street and then into tributaries, and so having that green space up there allows that to actually happen in a very natural way.
Indeed, indeed. And then even down on the street, you can introduce what we call rain gardens, green infrastructure, which involves catchment systems between the sidewalk and the street that will trap rain and allow it to percolate gradually into the ground. We also have high interest in what they call permeable paving systems, which are like a regular paving surface but perforated so that the rain goes straight down into the ground. The next thing would be rain barrels, which is an old technology that lots of people used to use.
Which I was just going to bring up if you didn't mention that, and this is something that homeowners can do.
Indeed.
They're very inexpensive, they're readily available, and they just last forever.
You can get them at some grocery stores and hardware stores. They can hold up to, I think, 60, 75 gallons. A lot of large office building developers are also exploring burying cisterns on their sites. The whole thing is about keeping the water on the site rather than sending it somewhere else.
And a lot of this, Brad, really goes back to technologies that have been around for thousands of years, actually. If you look at the Middle East and Northern Africa, some places of Asia, South America, where they've been using particularly the cisterns, but also the rain barrel was very useful because you need to protect every drop of rain that you could get and use that on a long-term basis.
It's a precious resource, and every drop of water you use that comes from the utility takes energy to burn, to bring to you, which means you're burning coal to bring yourself water.
And then, if it's not put in the yard, it goes back through into the sewer system. It takes more energy. So anyway, it's just the whole thing. Looking at this photograph, though, this is intriguing. I think you said this is in China, so this really is a World Reach television program. Tell us about what we're seeing here, because I think this really has a good message for us that we need to be thinking about for American cities.
This is a fantastic project. It's called the Kunli Stormwater Park. It's in Kunli, China, which is an area of rapid new development in China. What you're seeing is something on the order of the size of Central Park, but instead of being a big recreation space, the recreation is limited to the edge of the park. through walkways and platforms. And then all of the water that falls in that vicinity of the city is directed and filtered through various systems and back into the ground.
Well, the thing about this too, I was over at the Olympics 2008, and they had what the green lung effect,
Yes.
as far as the layout, as far as the Olympic
Indeed.
Village is concerned.
Yeah.
And that's still working over there, and actually is working very well. So, and looking at this streetscape that we have here, I know you said this is actually out in almost a desert area
Yeah,
in Arizona,
indeed, yep.
but you can see how really cool, because a lot of it's not just physical, it's the psychological impact
Oh,
that we have.
absolutely. Who wouldn't want to go to school there? I mean, this is at Arizona State University. It is an expansion of the campus where they've done a dry landscape. So instead of having a lot of turf and water-intensive plantings, they've instead done very minimal planting and put in permeable surfaces, and also things you can't see in the picture that will catch water from the storms that do occur, which tend to drop a lot of rain very quickly.
Well, looking at this too, I think this is one of the things, Brad, that we need to think about, is that everybody wants to have grass, you're trying to make it like a golf course and all that. But actually what we're looking at for, in most cases, are native species that are
indeed.
indigenous to the areas.
Yes.
So every locale is going to be different,
Right.
but also it knows how to adapt to the changing conditions
Right.
that it has.
Working with what does well there, what grows there, and then in the case of a green roof, you're looking at a layer of a very tough and drought-tolerant plant that needs almost no care and feeding.
Yeah, looking at this, we only have about a minute and a half left. It goes quick, as you know, Brad. The images that we've had, and then as far as your journal is concerned, what kind of message you want people to take away? It's about a minute left that you would like them to know about your journal, and how do they get access to it?
Well, they can reach us at www.asla.org.
You want to do that one more time?
www.asla.org. They can find their way to subscribe or view the magazine on our blog, which is landscapearchitecturemagazine.org. The message I would say to take away is that city planners, regional planners should be calling on landscape architects as their problem solvers of first resort, not last resort, to resolve these problems of heat islands, water retention, and water capture.
Well, looking at that too, and we do have a few more seconds, about 30 seconds, one of the things that they need to look at, they need to be involved very early, and I think this
Early.
is what you were talking
Yes,
to.
indeed.
So when you have the architects, the engineers, the city planners, and the landscape architects all need to be around the table. And my understanding is in Washington, D.C. now they're bringing in the fire, the police, all the others, so that
Yes.
they're very early on
Indeed.
and involved in all of this.
Yeah, it saves a lot of headaches.
Well, thank you for being with us,
Thanks for
Brad.
having me. It's great to be
Good
here.
job, Brad
Thank you so
McKee,
much.
who is the editor-in-chief, Landscape Architecture Magazine. And as we're bringing this information to you, as we look at the changing landscape, also the climate, we need to think about all these things in advance so that we're actually saving money and preparing for the 9 billion souls who will be joining us on the planet as we create the Emerald Planet.
Listen to smoke before you give it a try.
Only you.
Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ripped off life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. And we're looking around the globe in 143 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference to a globe that's going from 7 to 9 billion souls. As you know, we're rapidly urbanizing. Over 54% of the world's population now live in urban areas. And they're saying by 2050 that percentage could be as much as 70%. And yet, if you look at a country like Brazil, a huge country with the Amazon, many rivers, almost 85% are now living in urban areas. So it's something that we need to be addressing now as we move through the 21st century and not waiting to 2050 and then wonder what happened to us in the first half of the century. So landscape architects are leading the way as far as how can we make space, particularly urban areas, more livable, to make it more comfortable, and at the same time to address the very complex issues of climate change. I have Michael Ferguson, who is a FASLA, and I'm going to let him explain what that actually means, but it's very important. And he's the founder, president of Michael Ferguson Landscape Architects. And Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Glad to have you here, and we'll have some of these photographs going behind us. But the professional designation, what does it mean?
Well, FASLA stands for Fellow of the American Society of Landscape Architects.
And I understand there's very few of those, and it's quite an important designation.
Well, it's a nice distinction and one that I'm very proud of, yes.
And it's hard to earn, as I understand it. Tell us a little bit about your firm. When was it organized, and maybe some specialities that it has before we get into this whole notion of urban architecture and how landscape architects fit into that.
Well, good. I am in private practice. I have an office of 12 people actually here locally in Washington. The work we do is quite broad ranging in types and locations. Some work in the U.S., some work overseas, but a broad spectrum that includes residential, work in cities, public space, a lot on campuses, and a lot on historic and cultural sites.
Well, I know the work that you're doing is very important because you really look at the environment around the buildings, the area that you're working in toto, so you're involving every aspect of that site and also the native species, the plants, and then the animals and human beings are going to interact with that space. So what really makes an urban landscape livable?
Yeah,
I think this is really the crux of what we're talking about.
It's a good question. And I would back up by saying, actually, I come out of a background in architecture. My undergraduate degree and early work was in architecture. I have moved into landscape architecture and committed my career to landscape architecture. But that idea of an integral thinking about inside and outside simultaneously is very much a part of my kind of working perspective on things. As a landscape architect, and I do practice that, I love plants. Plants are what brought me to the profession to begin with. And I think people expect plants from us, and we love to deliver it. And when I think about the things that you are talking about in this session, roof gardens, rain gardens, street tree, all those aspects of green, any one of them you could pick and talk about the impact, positive impact they have. Trees for the shade they bring, for the reduction in heat island and the improvement in stormwater. All the things they do to contribute to the comfort, to the health, and to the beauty of the city are immense. But I also think, and you touched on it in your introduction, they need to be seen as an integral part of a broader, positive, strong urban design framework and thinking about that urban design framework.
I think, Michael, that many people don't really look at the interplay between, nature, even if it's a streetscape, and the buildings and the pavement and all these materials that are brought into a place, because most areas, asphalt and concrete is not native to that particular area. There was some green space there. So looking at the way that you attach this, the tools that you use, how do you take those tools and then blend all this together so you're having the minimum impact but the maximum outcome as far as humankind is concerned in actually using that space?
Well, the interesting thing, I think, is the degree to which those tools that you're talking about, I think rain gardens, street trees, all of those things have exploded in recent years. The choices that we have among them, the science that supports them, and the construction industry that actually facilitates their implementation. Those things have exploded in recent years and really enriched the tools we have. But I think the tool that in fact is the most effective is expectations. And it's a change in expectations.
That's really interesting, expectations.
Expectations that I think programs like this have contributed to. Expectations that we see in the general public and in our individual clients that look for the input we can have.
So what you're looking at then is the client, the customers, the citizens of a local area then are trying to tease out of this as the best way for them to live, interact with their locality, but how the landscape architect then is going to bring all this about. So it's in toto then.
Yeah, and the dramatic change when I look at work over the last 15 years, 15 years ago we struggled hard to be heard on environmental issues. We struggled hard to do anything more than meeting basic regulatory requirements. To do anything innovative or anything untested was extremely difficult. Now the sea change is that the expectations are there that those things are the things we bring to the work, and the degree to which that is effective as a tool, it provides us with a leverage that we haven't had before to really do the kinds of things that we want to do, that are right to do for the environment and these issues of climate change.
Well, I think your professional association, this is the American Society of Landscape Architects, has really coalesced around this and providing a very positive image as far as the profession itself, interacting with Congress and local and state governments. So how do you work on, say, these old towns, some of them 100, 200 years old, kind of language, people have moved out. Now people are trying to move back in because they want to get out of these very high-rise and filled urban areas. So you have really this push-pull going on right now, is how to balance all of this.
Well, I think balance is the issue. We're doing some work in Hartford. I think an interesting project because it deals with big issues and small issues at the same time. Big issues like the daylighting, resurfacing of a river that ran through the city in the 19th century. Small moves like putting directional maps on the backs, on pet heads on the back of the walk signs. Those things are incorporated into a thing called the I-Quilt plan for Hartford. Hartford is like a lot of cities in the Northeast, just what you said, thriving downtown at the turn of the 19th century, and actually one of the national role model on urban parks at that time. And in the 20th century, a downtown that's struggling. The I-Quilt, but with two great assets. One is its cultural venues, ranked very, very high, both in terms of quality and quantity of cultural assets, and a very compact, walkable downtown. So the I-Quilt is a web of walkways that reconnects the cultural assets of the city, reconnects the city as a whole, and has really captured the imagination of the local population as a plan that builds on existing assets, that builds on existing infrastructure, that is seen as a catalyst that will actually develop both private and public future investments, but that will in the end draw people back into the city, repopulate the downtown, provide the kind of densities that get us away from fossil fuel consumption and really do address that.
And I think one of the things about this, Michael, is really looking at these cities, because there are so many barriers put up when you go into suburbia. You're going out, so you had fences, you have large yards, houses that are set way back. Where in the urban landscape, things are built right almost to the edge of the street, and all the infrastructure is right there to be seen. It's open and available to the public. And it sounds what you're doing, Michael, is that you're reconnecting people to their own living area regardless of where they're located.
It's very much that, and I think I touched on this idea of coupling ideas of urban design and landscape architecture of plants and people, and it is, or it builds on, while urban design is an extraordinarily complex endeavor, some of that builds on very, very simple principles, the kinds of things that William White and Christopher Alexander provide that look at the way people use outdoor space and develop patterns and principles for that. If those are combined and applied at an urban design level to make places that people want to occupy, then it reinforces that idea of people coming back and living in those densities.
Well, looking at the people coming back and in actually enjoying the densities, I know one of the things that you have in the United States that we got away from is, the cafes, people actually having dinner and coffee and things on the streets and interacting as people are walking by and all that. Looking at the buildings, what do you see as far as the changes of urban buildings that encourages people to slow down a little bit, enjoy the architecture, at the same time take advantage of the natural plants that are being put in these streetscapes, and also the rain gardens are being developed now at a very rapid rate to cut down the flow and the velocity of water that's coming off of all these tall buildings?
Well, certainly a much higher level of recognition and attention to the idea of how buildings meet the ground, what goes inside those buildings that encourages public use and activity outside the buildings, even what kind of slickness the buildings have and what kind of scale they have when they come down to the ground.
This is the type of materials that you're really looking at.
The materials and the scale at which they're applied that actually slow people down, give them places to move out of the flow, small areas. I think one of the most extraordinary examples of what's happened recently in making city space more livable. Of all the things happening in New York, and a lot of great grand things that get a lot of publicity, like the High Line, the thing that impresses me the most is the simplest and most modest, and that's where streets, underused streets, have been converted to places for people. Parts of streets that languished with cars, now people linger in, with the simplest application of pots and movable furniture that have turned unused streets into very, very active corners and eddies in the middle of nowhere with very, very little investment, almost none. A lot of questions about the cost of sustainability. How much more does it need to cost? Those kinds of examples, which now you see everywhere in Manhattan, and I think you'll start seeing more and more across the country, are great examples of minimal investment and maximum gain.
Well, I think that's just absolutely fantastic. Michael Ferguson, who is the founder, president of Michael Ferguson Landscape Architects. And we're talking about how the outside actually becomes part of the inside, this balance for a quality of life. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor, It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in it tomorrow.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we look around the globe in 143 different nations, looking for the way that they address the issues as we move through the 21st century and prepare for 9 billion souls to be on the planet by 2050. In a very rapidly urbanizing world, how are we going to actually combine the resources that we have to take the living space that is actually going up and out and covering more and more of the agricultural land that's needed to produce food, but at the same time to bring about an increasing quality of life. Many people say that it's only going to be the quantity of the people we're going to deal with by the middle of the 21st century, but many people are saying that actually the quality of life will increase. And so we have a profession, the landscape architects, that are making that difference as they combine the outside and the inside of the buildings and the urban landscapes to make it an even better place to live, while at the same time addressing the magnitude of the issues around climate change. Sandra Yusuf Clinton is a FASLA. We'll let her talk about what that means. We're going to do this for each one, Sandra, that comes in. She goes by the name of Sandy, so when you hear that term, you know who I'm talking about. She's the president of Clinton Associates Landscape Architects. And Sandy, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And as a woman in this industry, there's many guys involved in this, and I know that particularly landscape architects is changing very rapidly as more and more females go into it. So what attracted you to the industry of landscape architecture?
Well, I was a plant science major in college, and I always had a real interest in the ground and in gardening. My mother gave me a small plot as a kid, and so I was able to, generate an idea about what that meant. And then in high school, I was put in charge of the greenhouse, and I was encouraged by mentors and so on to continue into the profession. And I went into plant science and got into that and realized I wasn't actually thrilled about plant science, but I met a particular person who said, well, what about landscape architecture? And I'd never heard those two words put together before.
And actually you combine those then, so you have the plant science that you learned about and all the native species from different areas, and at the same time architecture. It sounds like it's almost a perfect balance as far as your background is concerned and the impact that you're having as a professional.
Yeah, I really found my niche when I put those two together because it's art. There's art in the landscape architecture piece. There's the culture of plant material and the science of
I was going to say you have both the arts and the science in what's going on. What does it mean, and this is kind of off conversation, but I think it's very important because being a female, you actually go out to 3 special channels that are about 98.5% female audiences.
Wonderful.
This is in the millions. And so they're looking for leaders that are in this area. So having your own landscape architect firm, what does that mean? Are there any special challenges that you have, or is it all the same, male, female, and all the other different issues of diversity?
Well, it's a good question. I think I found that this profession is very open to women and men quite equally. When I entered the profession almost 30 years ago, we were probably primarily a male-oriented profession, but now I have probably just as many women friends in the profession as I have men, and I think it's probably balanced out a bit in the last many years. But it's a fabulous profession. There's crossover, it matters not gender-wise. Clients don't really seem to care whether you're male or female working with them, and And I think it's a fantastic profession for women to be in.
Well, obviously you flourished in all that. And I like the theme that we're going to be talking about in this particular segment about the health benefits, the health impacts as far as landscape architecture is concerned. Tell us what your perspective is on that and how that really has direct correlation to people living in urban areas that are interacting on a day-to-day basis, not just with their humankind, but also with the buildings and the streetscapes that are there.
Right. Well, I find that, and what I've learned and I've read, and science is really telling us this, both sort of sociological science and psychological science and so on, is telling us that it's very vital that we as humans have connection with nature. So connection with nature in a city is quite different what you might get connection with nature in a suburban or a country type of situation. But connection with nature in the city is probably more important, because we found through studies and science and so on that if we provide physical activity, if we provide open green space, if we provide space for recreation and so on, people will come together in that space. And first of all, on the sort of well-being part, the health and well-being part, is that more people connect with each other, for one thing, so there's a lot of social interaction that happens outside in the environment.
And what you're talking about there, Sandy, really is this mind, body, spirit connection. And this is not to be metaphysical in all this, but yet it really is, because we have to have all three of these in toto, because we're human beings. And then with the space that we surround ourselves in needs to have the same type of balance.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Well, it's just as you said earlier, that there's a lot of pavement out there and there's some green. And in my mind, we need to actually flip that, the math on that. More green will be healthier for our cities, healthier for our living conditions. It brings opportunities of physical activity, of urban farming, of people getting together in the outdoor environment. Plus, the science of it says that we create a much cooler environment for the planet in doing so.
Well, if you look at a place like downtown New York City in Manhattan, now some of the largest urban gardening and farming is going on, but it's about 300 feet up in the air. It's on the top of these buildings. And then you look at a city like Detroit that is de-peopled over the last 100 years because of the decline of industry, and yet they're going in and they're taking out about 10,000 houses and cleaning the landscape there to bring in urban farming in a massive scale. So you see urban areas really adjusting to this new reality of the 21st century, and it truly is a new reality.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the direction that we're going, and I think landscape architects have a wonderful role to play. And I think for once our profession is being really thought of as the forefront in development in this way, that we have information and knowledge that we've actually known about for some time and we've pushed forward over the years, but now it's really becoming quite an important part of development teams to have landscape architects. Oftentimes we're called in before the architects or the engineers are even called in to help site buildings or help site major design parcels and say, if you looked at it this way, the opportunities environmentally, the opportunities socially, would have a different impact.
Well, it's just like this slide we have here, and I'm not specifically talking about slides, but just look at the amount of green space that is created in the design that you have here. What is canopy, and what does that mean as far as a site selection of an area?
Well, canopy is tree coverage. So the coverage that the canopy of a tree, so it's the green branches and leaves and so on of a tree. And the canopy of a tree is very, very important because it provides, number one, shade. Number two, evapotranspiration. So the water and moisture content of the air goes through leaves and creates a cooling effect. So in a way, it's an outdoor air conditioner. So when you're under a tree, it's oftentimes many, many degrees cooler than just outside of that canopy cover.
And that's the thing I find really amazing when you're walking down streets, and this is something that I wanted to bring up in an earlier session, but these little, what I call pocket parks, and they're all over the place in many of the cities, say like in New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, and you think about, geez, they're really, what do you gain from such a small space? But it's amazing the psychological impact that it makes, but also the physical impact that these little pocket parks actually make.
Yes, I agree completely, and I think one of the things that I try to get across to clients, particularly developers who are dealing with very, very large land masses, is that if you had a series of these small pocket parks, it doesn't take having Central Park to make something beautiful and green and enrich the lives of people around there.
Actually, it's just the opposite of that.
A series of these connected, so connected by trail systems, they could be exercise routes, they could be bikeways, things like that. All of a sudden you've created this chain of really beautiful, wonderful, and cool environments that actually help the environment.
Well, we have a very good friend that's working on the monarch butterfly program, and this really relates to the concept what you're talking about. Only his is going for thousands of miles as you go from Canada all the way to Mexico and back for the monarch butterfly. But they have what they call these little lily pads, and so the monarch butterflies can go to each of these places. They can regenerate and rejuvenate themselves and rest. And really, you're talking about the same thing in urban areas as far as allowing people to recoup, regenerate, and to interact with each other, so that again, this mind, body, spirit balance is so important, and particularly as you go to 9 billion people. I mean, that's just amazing.
Unthinkable, isn't it? I think we humans need lily pads. And that's what we're
really
trying to bring as landscape architects.
Well, I think this is something you're doing. We've been showing these slides, and these are just, and I'm in awe of this. I don't know if this is a photograph or this is artist rendering.
No, this is a real thing,
a real place.
It's
just amazing. But anyway, looking at this and the blend as far as, the roof lines and all that, and what we're really getting to is the mix of the materials, the location, and, the flora and the fauna that goes together. How do we bring this balance? But it's affordable balance for people, and it's not something that's just for the elites or the very rich.
Right. Well, I actually think that the balance is much easier to attain than than most people might think, and I think part of that is because we all have a part in this. Everybody can take part in this. So if you're a developer, you're taking part in a much broader level of having livable streetscapes that work for people. If you're an architect and you're doing a single building, you have the opportunity to do both a streetscape, a rooftop, perhaps some courtyards that add to the well-being of people, the health and well-being of those people who will live in that building. If you're a resident, you have the opportunity to capture water and reuse it for irrigation, to hang a laundry line instead of using a dryer, to open windows instead of using an air conditioner, to grow your own vegetables and irrigate them from your rain barrel where you've captured water, and so on. So I think each one of us has an opportunity to add to this ability to green and have this balance happen.
Well, I think it's just fantastic what you're doing, and it's very impressive, and thank you for sharing with us as, a woman being in this profession and showing the change. Sandra Yusuf Clinton, who is president of Clinton Associates Landscape Architects, has a very impressive professional designation, FASLA. Thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Around the world, 1 out of every 3 women will be beaten or otherwise abused in their lifetime, often by a family member or loved one. A future free from violence. It's all she's ever wished for.
Did you know you have the power to stop children from joining gangs? You can help a father find a job and home for his family. You can assist a woman who can't afford the medicine she needs to live and the home she can't live without. You can choose to make a difference in our community. Support Volunteers of America, and you can help improve the lives of nearly 2 million Americans each year with programs and services that help individuals and families overcome their challenges to to become as independent as possible. Support the programs that are working in our community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
For some folks, saving for the future is easy, but for you, it might take a little more effort. Saving for your future is your responsibility, and there's a lot to save for.
I never thought of that.
Like your child's education, perhaps uncovered medical expenses, or just to be sure you can live the way you want when you retire. The time is now to save for tomorrow. Save now or work forever. The choice is yours. Choose to save.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we're looking around the globe in 143 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. Coming from Washington, D.C., which is really a hub of urban landscape change, a huge impact as far as having private citizens, the federal government, private industries, and research institutes all working together to look at climate change, the impact that the higher velocities of water, rising temperatures as far as heat is concerned, and how can we address these issues in urban landscapes, and making the capital of the United States as a national model program to bring these ideas around the globe. We have someone who is actually the past president. I'm going to ask him to talk about that a little bit. Okay. The American Society of Landscape Architects, Dennis Carmichael, a very articulate young man and a real innovator and leader as far as landscape architect is concerned. And he's also a principal of Parker Rodriguez. And Dennis, welcome.
Great, thanks.
Glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about the American Society of Landscape Architects. What is it? What does it mean?
Well, it's the National Organization for the Profession of Landscape Architecture. It has about 16,000 members. There is a professional group that runs the practice, so to speak, but there are volunteer leaders, and I served in that capacity as a volunteer leader in 2006, and it was quite an honor to be elected.
Oh, I tell you, and then this FASLA, what does that mean?
It means fellow in the society, and that recognizes a career of accomplishment, which again is also quite an honor, and I'm quite proud of that.
Yeah, and it's quite prestigious to have that. And also my understanding is that you are actually a leader of the foundation, which actually prepares new generations and the profession itself as far as increasing the standards of professionalism within landscape architecture.
Yes, the Landscape Architecture Foundation is an allied organization with ASLA. It's a separate organization, and it's devoted to sustainable landscapes, research and scholarship devoted around that piece of landscape architecture.
Well, I tell you, we've been doing our research about you, and it's quite impressive the work that you've been doing and the years that you've been doing it. And I know as far as the green infrastructure, we were just in the little preamble in Washington, D.C., and I know you're doing a number of projects. And actually, we're going to kind of stay tightly close to these slides that we have here, Dennis. There's some real messages here, and thank you for sharing these with us. So let's just start off with the first one and just tell us what we're looking at here, the differences, the changes, but what's the long-term impact in each of these slides that we're going to talk about?
Okay, sure. The first one that you should be seeing is a project we just completed for the EPA. It's the greening.
That's the Environmental Protection Agency.
Yes, yeah, and it's the program that they have called the Greening of America's Capitals. It's a nationwide program. The District of Columbia, the nation's capital, got one of those grants this past year, and they were interested in having EPA help them at the Anacostia Metro stop to make it more walkable, more connected to its neighborhood. We were selected as the landscape architect to lead that team. And I think part of what we brought to that was the fact that we're educated in engineering and planning and art and ecology. And because of that, we were able to lead the team to a more integrated solution.
Well, many people don't know this is a very socioeconomically challenged community, very high unemployment rate, almost 38%. You have obesity rates exceeding 80%. The educational rate is less than half. Many have high school degrees and all that. But what you're doing is saying that this area can really transform itself as we move through the 21st century. And one of the ways you're doing that is just by the natural environment that's being created. And so we look at this, the landscape that you have in the right of this photograph. What are we seeing here that actually brings about an increased quality of life, but also addresses climate change at the same time?
Well, the upper screen shows a before and after image of how we improve the walkability. And you see what is a bus driveway that was about 40 feet wide that is then narrowed to be a much narrower driveway and widening the sidewalk so the pedestrians are favored over the vehicles. You're seeing that sidewalk is made out of porous paving, that we have bioretention cells where the trees are. So we're cleansing that water before we release it into the river.
And also, too, you're reducing, as we're looking at here, the amount of heat, the velocity of the runoff of water into the sewer systems and to the tributaries.
Absolutely. One of our favorite things was, in the image on the upper right, Interstate 295 courses over Anacostia, and it actually acts as a barrier between that part of the city and the river. And it's actually a very unsafe underpass. So they said, please, can we have it better lit? We said, of course. So one of the things that we came up with was the idea of having wind turbines on that overpass to catch the wind made by the passing cars, which is a free resource. So as these people are driving past every day, the energy that is transmitted from the velocity of the cars is providing the light.
I tell you, this is just absolutely fantastic. So going to this next series of images we have here, Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, this next one is a modest little streetscape project in downtown Washington, D.C. called Constitution Square. It's 1 block long, but what it demonstrates is that you can, in fact, cleanse the water. You can do your part on a small basis, and we think more projects in the future will do things like this.
And so what you're doing is you're scaling it down, and just like we were talking about in an earlier segment of these little pockage park is really important as far as the psychology and the physiology of humans that use this area.
Exactly. And also one of the things that these slides represent is what we call ecological services. The biofiltration, which is catching the water from the street, cleansing it before we release it into the watershed, has a value. And we believe that that's an important part, that every project should have ecological services.
Well, we have the Blue Plains treatment center here, which is one of the, not one of, it's the largest in the world by almost 50% higher than anything else. And one of the things that just bedevils them all the time is, all the storm water runoff that they have for this, huge amount of open building space and all over Washington, D.C. So anything that you can do to cut that velocity and actually the actual amount that's going into their system as well as the tributaries directly is very, very important. This is a very impressive photograph that you have here in this montage of slides. Tell us what we're looking at here and the impacts that we're actually seeing.
Yeah, this is a park that is done in Boston. It was part of the Big Dig, and people are probably familiar with the Big Dig. It was the lowering of an elevated expressway. You can see it in the upper left-hand corner. That was the existing condition in downtown Boston. It was 100% impervious. It was the asphalt concrete jungle. And they built the highway in a tunnel underneath, and the slide immediately to its right is the park that now is seen on the ground. It's actually a green roof because it's on top of the tunnel, so it has all the attributes of a green roof, except it's at grade. So most people don't even know it's a green roof. But it's important that we made it as green as we could to increase the amount of pervious area, and we added rain gardens and native plantings so that, again, everything we did was in support of cleaning the water and purifying the air.
Well, looking at the plantings in the lower right of this, I don't know if these are native species or not, but I know this is something, Dennis, that you and all the landscape architects are trying to do is go back to native species with the area so that they adapting to the changing climate and environment they have in the area. Tell us, why is it important to have native species, and what do you see as the long-term impact of native species?
Well, yes, all the plants that you're seeing in that screen are native, and we do think it's important because it lowers the amount of undue input that you need to add to planting, undue water, undue fertilizer, undue pesticides. That's what we need to do. We need to come back to the planting regime that is native to that environment, so you don't need to add energy and chemicals and other resources.
Well, the thing too about reducing the amount of chemicals we have using this as our backdrop to talk about is that you're purifying, because it's not just the land, but it's air and water that interacts with the land that either cleanses, the environment around us, or actually continues or enhances the pollution that's going on around us.
It absolutely does. And we know that trees uptake the carbon dioxide and add oxygen. That's why we get along so well together, humans and trees.
Well, looking at this interaction now, this is calming. We're looking at this on television, but it actually just kind of lowers your pulse rate and kind of purifies the mind, if you will. Tell us how you can actually go in and take an area like this, so you're transforming people from a very urban area and quickly into almost like you're going into a forest.
Well, this is a modest little forest in a suburban office park, and we were asked to design the park, and it had been planned to be nothing but grass and trees. And we said to the developer, when we went out and looked at the site and discovered that it was second growth forest, what if we saved all the trees? Because, in fact, the name of the project was Woodland Park. We thought it would be very ironic if we removed that very resource. And the developer said, well, we're not so sure. And I said, what if we could save you $1 million? He said, I'm listening. And we did. We saved
It's
$1 million.
amazing how you can go just, look at the cost of this whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what you're seeing there is that what looks like a concrete sidewalk is actually industrial steel grating, like you would use in a factory floor. And it hovers about 6 inches above the forest floor, so it is a porous paving. The rainwater goes right through it. So we had minimal disturbance to the forest floor, and as you can see, we didn't have to pay to remove trees, we don't have to pay for new trees, and we don't have to pay to maintain trees. It's all just there.
Looking at this is kind of a side question, but why is it when you're coming in and you're looking at a place, they want to remove all the vegetation and then plant it back?
I don't know, and it's one of my personal pet peeves, and I'm always in search of saving trees and or transplanting trees.
Well, I think we have, whoops, let's go back to this slide here. I have a hair trigger as far as my mouse is concerned. Tell us what we're seeing here and how is this increasing the quality of life to everybody within this urban area?
Yeah, well, sometimes we talk about recycling individual sites. This was recycling a neighborhood, in effect, in downtown Louisville. It was a 3-block area of downtown Louisville that was being threatened with demolition, and it was cast iron buildings. So we said, what if we made it more pedestrian friendly and turned it into almost an outdoor museum for cast iron architecture? And lo and behold, the people loved it, and it's now one of the more vibrant neighborhoods in downtown Louisville.
Well, we have about 17 seconds exactly left. So what would you like to leave with our domestic and international audiences before the credits start to roll?
Green infrastructure pays, it does not cost.
Well, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And we're just going to sit here and chat away, Dennis, but thank you. Appreciate the society